Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
So today we take up gate 41 of the 108 gates of Dharma illumination. So I think we have a few folks here who maybe are first timers on Sunday. So quick recap: the 108 gates was included in the 12 fascicle version of Dogen Shobo Genzo. He did not actually write this piece of text. It was lifted from something else called the Sutra of the Collected Past Deeds of the Buddha, but he included it, or somebody included it, in the 12 fascicle and version, and then he wrote a little commentary after that. So we've been going through one gate per week, or I have, throwing some things out there to think about, consider, practice with, from the Sanshin family style, viewpoint about these gates. So today we're at gate 41, which reads, "Enjoyment of the meaning of the Dharma is a gate of Dharma illumination, for with it we seek the meaning of the Dharma." So we know with these gates there's two parts. There's something, and then there's, because of this thing, somehow we have some illumination and some other result happens, right? So we've always got two parts to consider. So enjoyment of the meaning of the Dharma is a gate of Dharma illumination, for with it we seek the meaning of the Dharma. I've actually got a bit of a bone to pick with this translation. Because as usual, I went back and looked at the kanji because I like to know what's the flavor. Sometimes there are words that show up in other places that, there's some allusion there that we need to understand. So of course I went and looked at the kanji. So the word being translated as meaning here is dori, which is actually something like reason or logic or sense. So we can see how it's been translated as meaning. But when we take this apart, do is way. It's like Buddha way, do. It's the same do as Dogen, right? This ri is the same ri as ri and ji, or absolute and relative. So it's that same word that sometimes shows up as principle or absolute. So we have something like the absolute way of the Dharma, right? This thing that's been translated, the meaning of the Dharma. We could say the absolute way of the Dharma, or the logic or the principle of the Dharma, rather than just the meaning of the Dharma. I think there's something kind of specific there. The word translated as enjoyment is negao, and negao is an interesting word. It's actually to desire or to wish for, but the feeling is something we're praying for. It's a prayerful wish. It's not just like, I wish I had a powerboat or I wish I had some chocolate cake. It's like this prayerful kind of wish. So negao shows up all the time in the echoes. So if you look at the Japanese version of the echoes, or the ones that we do in Japan, negao shows up typically in the form of negawaku. But it's the same word. It's like what we pray for. So usually in our English echoes, we say something like, may such and so happen. Now that we've chanted whatever it is, in fact, we'll see this in the echo during the World Peace Ceremony today. Now that we've chanted whatever it is, and we've dedicated the merit to whoever we're dedicating it to, may such and so happen. The Sotoshu translations of the standard echoes say, what we pray for is da-da-da-da-da, and that's nagao. So that's the word we're running into in this gate. It's not like a small self-thirsting desire. It's a larger kind of spiritual aspiration. Somehow this has shown up in this gate as enjoyment. I'm sure there's some subtlety there that I don't understand. But it's useful for me to know it's nagao. That's a familiar word. We should also, of course, say a word here about Dharma and what that means. One meaning, of course, is what the Buddha taught. We call that the Dharma. What got recorded in sutras, what teachers like Dogen had to say about the content of Buddha's teachings, we call all of that Dharma. Another meaning, of course, is reality, the way the universe works. Buddha said that the Dharma is always here, whether there is a Buddha to preach it or a Sangha to study it. The Dharma is bigger than that. The Dharma is how things are functioning, what's actually going on. So it's the true functioning of our lives, whether we like it or not, or expect it or not, or understand it or not. This is what's actually going on in the universe. So if we put these things together and think about this gate, instead of enjoyment of the meaning of the Dharma, we might say aspiring for the reason or the logic of the Dharma. In other words, we want to deeply understand how the universe actually works, how the parts fit together, how these karmic circumstances are unfolding because there are myriad karmic circumstances, how this one unified reality makes sense, right? How the pieces come together and how this thing makes sense. So, that sounds an awful lot like bodhicitta to me, right? Or bodhishin, arousing the mind of awakening, or we might say, arousing the aspiration for the Buddha way. So arousing that mind of awakening makes us want to investigate the lives of the individual self and the universal self that make up this one unified reality. So we really want to see both perspectives, this individual self and also this universal self. So in section 7 of the Genjo Koan, Dogen says something which is probably very familiar to us. When a person first seeks after the Dharma, the person becomes far from the boundary of the Dharma. When the Dharma is correctly transmitted to the self, the person is immediately an original person. So isn't that interesting? This whole seeking after the Dharma thing, of course, immediately raises some difficulty. It means we want something, and it means we're chasing after it, which we hear about all the time, is sort of one of the root causes of our suffering. So we think chasing after the Dharma is good. We think the Dharma is good. We want some, right? Because it's the Dharma. So it's like, who's going to object to that? And yet we keep hearing the craving and aversion and chasing and escaping are the most basic roots of our suffering. So we're far from the boundary of the Dharma. So isn't there a direct conflict then between this gate and the teachings about opening the hand or about non-attachment? Well, here's what Hojo-san says. I think that for most of us, we begin to practice in order to fill some emptiness or recover from some sort of unhealthy life. We call this aspiration in Buddhist terms bodhicitta, or bodhishin in Japanese, which is often translated into English as bodhi mind, awakening mind or way-seeking mind. Isn't this another kind of desire? Yes, it is. Only the object has changed. We feel sick of living seeking after money, fame, status, etc., and we start to look for something spiritual, in our case, Buddhism or enlightenment, liberation, or nirvana. Without such desire, we don't have any motivation for a spiritual search. So Hojo-san goes on to say that in this quote from the Genjo Koan, Dogen points out that in the beginning of our practice, we're still trying to fill a gap. We're still practicing with a greedy mind, with a grasping mind. So the motivation to practice actually becomes the obstacle to practice. The thing that gets us on the cushion, if we cling to that, can become a problem because now there's grasping, chasing, and seeking after something. So Hojo-san asks, how can we practice without the desire for practice? Which is an interesting place to be. So if we can do that, then we are really just sitting. Shikantaza is just sitting. If we can practice without the desire for practice, then there's nothing extra, right? Then we are really just sitting. And it's not I or we who are sitting. The universe is carrying out practice through this body and mind because this is the universal self, right? This is the connection between individual self and universal self. So the universe is doing what the universe does. It's carrying out its essential functioning through this body and mind because we are not sitting grasping for something, chasing after something in our practice. So this is where we get to understand the logic or the principle of the Dharma that this gate is pointing us towards. Bodhishin or bodhicitta is the mind seeking awakening, but it can also be interpreted as the mind that is awake because we know, right, that awakening is already here. It's not like we have to go get something that we don't already have. So this is the mind that aspires to live in accordance with reality instead of being pulled around by all our egocentric desires that kind of work against that. So this is the mind that's not practicing in order to get something for ourselves or for the small self. We're not sitting in order to work on stress reduction or gain some magical spiritual power or something like that. Sometimes in the sutras we see people who gain some magical kind of powers from our zazen. Not what we're doing here. Dogen says in the Shobogenzo Hotsubodaishin, which is the fascicle about arousing Bodhi mind, to arouse Bodhi mind is to vow to save others before oneself and to actually work to fulfill the vow. So it's not just something here, or even just something here. It's actively working on that vow to liberate all beings. So it touches on at least two of the components of spiritual health, I think. Those two being the balance or integration between individual self and universal self, or small self and large self, self and whole, and having a sense of purpose in life. Having some feeling that our life is meaningful, that our life means something. But these are two, I think, distinct but related kinds of searches that are going on here. The search for the Dharma is about understanding how reality actually works, how the universe actually works, seeing it clearly, it's in its entirety, not leaving things out, not adding in our stuff, right? So this is practice in seeing through the eyes of prajna, or wisdom, seeing through Buddha's eye. The other search is centered on the question, what does my life mean? Why am I here? What am I doing? What's the role of my individual self within the universal self, or connected to the universal self? So, is there any point to my getting out of bed in the morning? And we've probably all been there at some point in our lives saying, what am I doing? How am I going forward? Is there any point to my even getting up in the morning and facing the day? So, Hojo-san says, our problems begin when we follow our natural human tendency to look for meaning in our activities. We usually don't do anything without knowing the point of that action. We ask ourselves what the outcome is, why it's important, how others are affected, and whether or not there's a benefit for us. By extension, we look for the meaning of our lives. So I think these two searches are connected, the search for the Dharma and the search for this kind of personal meaning in our lives. If we understand the nature of reality, then we understand the nature of self. We have some insight into what's going on with this individual self. Why is something significant? What is the context for that? So Bodhi-shin, or the mind that is awake, says, I know there's something bigger than me, and I want to know something more about that. I recognize that this is not the whole story, and I want to investigate that. I want to inquire into that. And that probably seems pretty familiar to us after we've been on the cushion for a little while. We know it's our personal suffering probably that gets us into the door of the Dharma Center, for the first time, gets us onto the cushion. And then once we do that and we establish practice and we begin to open the hand and we begin to see beyond our moment by moment personal stuff, we go, wait a minute, there's something bigger happening here. And it feels important to know what that is, or be in touch with that in some way, right? And so we feel this bodhicitta. And I think there's a cycle that happens here. There's some bodhicitta, we get on the cushion, it supports some more bodhicitta, and now we are into practice. Or as I like to say, the Dharma has reeled us in. There's no escape from the Dharma. So, is there a point to my getting out of bed in the morning? Of course, the answer is yes. All of our teachers say, yes, there is. Because when I get out of bed, the whole universe gets out of bed. When I investigate this one unified reality, the whole universe is investigating itself. The whole universe is investigating this one unified reality because I'm not separate from the functioning of the universe. So I don't just get up for me. I get up for the whole universe and for all the beings in that universe. And is that not really deeply tied to our bodhisattva vow to liberate all beings? What are we doing but that? Getting up out of bed in the morning is simply carrying out that vow. Really, right? To liberate all beings, to investigate this one unified reality, to aspire for the logic or the principle of the Dharma. So when we feel like that's a tall order, gee, I'm getting out of bed on behalf of all beings, that can feel like a lot. That can feel like a tall order. We can remember that not only are we living on behalf of all beings, but all beings are living on behalf of us. So there's no separation there, right? We're living one unified life with all beings. So this is not just about I am all on my own supporting all of the beings in the universe, all of the activity, all of the life of the universe. They're also doing the same thing for me. We're in this thing together, right? Because there's no separation. So all beings are getting out of bed in the morning for us too. There's no point at which we are cut off from all beings. So we can choose to ignore that connection. We can decide we don't want to pay attention to that, or we can forget about that, but that doesn't make that connection go away. The reality is there is interconnection, whether we're aware of it, or understand it, or like it, or want it, or not. So the point of our lives, or the meaning of our lives, is that we are bodhisattvas, and we were so from day one, because we were connected from day one. Our lives had a point, or had meaning, from the moment that this 5 skandhas took this human form. As soon as there were 5 skandhas, and immediately 5 skandhas cling to 5 skandhas, which is why we have all the things that go on with the self. As soon as that happened, there was bodhisattva activity. There was the point. So we don't have to worry about not having a place in the universe, or somehow not being included. We don't have to worry about not having something to contribute, getting up out of bed in the morning, is the first thing we can contribute in the day. Simply showing up for beings, showing up for all beings. So we're already doing that. We're already in that place. That doesn't mean, though, that we understand how that works, right? It doesn't mean we remember that all the time or that we really understand that functioning. It doesn't mean we know how to do it skillfully with wisdom and compassion. We all know, we forget from time to time. For that, the practice of aspiring for the reason or the logic or the principle of the Dharma is really helpful. This is why we're practicing, right? So how do we investigate our questions so that the Dharma starts to make sense for us? Well, that's why there are, I think, three aspects for our practice. We have Zazen, work, and study. That's the way we call it here at Sanshin, but those three areas are bigger than Sanshin. That's kind of a standard Sotoshu thing. There's the sitting practice, there's Dharma study, and there's some kind of beneficial action or work practice or activity of some kind, right? So these three elements of our practice are how we investigate the Dharma. This is how we figure out, how does this thing make sense, right? So Zazen is how we come to understand the meaning of the Dharma by sitting down and opening the hand and dropping off all the many ways that we create separation. So this is dropping off body and mind, right? Shinjin Datsukaku, dropping off body and mind. So all the ways that we create separation and sort of cling to that separation, we let go of in Zazen. So we stop labeling and making distinctions between ourselves and other beings. We stop clinging to our ideas about reality. Instead, we aspire to actually be in touch with that reality. This is what we're doing when we're sitting on the cushion. So we just let down all the barriers. We let everything in, right? Because we know originally there is no separation. Everything is already in. Everything is already here. But we'd like somehow for that not to be true. So in Zazen, we open the hand, we let down the barriers, we drop body and mind, we let everything in. So the way Dogen calls this in Genjo Koan, of course, another very famous writing, conveying oneself to all things, to carry out practice enlightenment is delusion. All things coming and carrying out practice enlightenment through the self is realization. So this is nothing more than we sit down, we open the hand, we drop off body and mind. There is no separation between ourselves and everything else. So we're just sitting right in the middle of it all, right? We're experiencing being personally intimate with the universe and with the functioning of the universe and with the Dharma. There was a time in his life where Hojo-san himself had a lot of questions about meaning. He was looking for meaning in his own life and meaning in the larger society and in the larger world, and he was not different than we are today in wrestling with those questions, which I think is kind of comforting in a way. As a student, though, he was wondering about the expectations of his society that somehow everyone would do well in school and get a good job and make money and buy a lot of impressive things. He saw a lot of chasing after status. And all the things that go with that. So he was questioning the value of this kind of competition for wealth and power and fame and luxury. Was this really, he's asking himself, is this really a useful measure of what's good and what's not good? Like what's the yardstick, and does that even make sense? Is that a healthy way to live? He's kind of thinking maybe not. So he starts reading. Sometimes he says he would escape from his classes into the library. He would skip class, right, in high school. He'd escape into the library, and he was done reading all kinds of things because he's looking for the answers to this. He's looking for the meaning of his life. So he's reading around, and he says, whatever I read seemed to be one person's idea from his limited experiences in a certain time and society. I wanted to know the meaning of meaning. So he's going beyond even what does my life mean and say, what does it mean for something to have meaning, right? So then he encounters Sawaki Roshi's teachings. And he says, to stop looking for meaning and simply do good-for-nothing zazen seemed like liberation from the endless circle of the dog chasing its tail. So you go, oh, wait a minute. Maybe it's a different question. Maybe I stop running around chasing. Maybe to simply sit down and do zazen with no goal is the way to break that cycle and find some meaning in not looking for meaning, if you will. So we don't look for meaning in our zazen. We don't ask why we do it. We just drop the barriers and let go of our thoughts and even our questions. We don't sit in zazen wondering, why am I doing this? We don't sit in zazen thinking, is there a goal for this? What am I going to get out of it? Because that's one more extra thing. As soon as there's extra things, there's not just sitting. So it's like we just drop all of that and simply sit down in the middle of the functioning of the universe. So that's the Zazen piece. Then there's the work piece. That's how we investigate the meaning of the Dharma with our activity, with our bodily sort of moving around, right? So in a way, we're doing the same thing that we're doing in Zazen. We're taking the same kind of approach to that activity that we take in Zazen. We're dropping off body and mind in the midst of completely engaging in what we're doing. So if what we're doing is Zazen, we're dropping off body and mind and completely engaging in Zazen. But of course, that's not the only place we do that kind of investigation. We can do that no matter what we're doing. Sweeping the floor, washing the car, balancing the checkbook, right? We can have the same kind of approach. So we can, through work, observe the teachings in a concrete way. If my job is growing vegetables, I get to see some important stuff. I get to see that that changes over time. Those plants change and grow, and conditions change over time. I get to see that a lot of things depend on the seed and the soil conditions, right, which is causes and conditions. I get to see if you plant a seed and the seed doesn't have good conditions, it doesn't grow, or it doesn't grow properly, or it doesn't grow the way we expect, maybe. I get to see that all those vegetables are connected to everything that's around them. In addition to, I'm connected to everything around me. I get to really see those important teachings about the nature of existence in a really concrete way. So I can observe this about the vegetables I'm growing, or the house I'm building, or the work that I'm doing, the website I'm creating. And then I also get to see all of that's also true for me, also true of the self. So we get a really concrete, tangible, very personal, intimate experience of the three marks of existence. And we get to see how the universe functions. So finally, we can come to understand how the universe works, right? We also get to understand that through Dharma Study, which is the third piece. So, one of the things we can study is this famous story about Bodhidharma, which I'm sure you've heard. Shortly after arriving in China from India, Bodhidharma visits Emperor Wu. What's the meaning of the Dharma? The emperor asks. Vast emptiness without holiness. Bodhidharma replied, who's standing before me now? I don't know. I'm sure you've all heard that story. It's a very famous story. What's the meaning of the Dharma? Vast emptiness, nothing holy. That's a kind of a famous thing. So according to Bodhidharma, the whole point of this aspiration for understanding the universe is to understand emptiness. He says that's the center of it all. That's the key thing. Our whole Dharma investigation is about having a really personal insight into emptiness. Everything else makes sense and falls into place if we just get that piece, because so many other teachings are related to that, at least in our piece of the tradition, right? You really can't separate emptiness from a lot of the other most fundamental, basic, foundational teachings. So quick review, emptiness or suchness or thusness is the teaching that no conditioned things have a separate or permanent self-nature, right? So there's nothing we can point to in any conditioned thing and say, there, that's the permanent, unchanging, discrete essence of this thing, whatever the thing is. And by the way, it's not just a physical thing. It's ideas and concepts and dreams and imagination, right? So anything that's conditioned, there's nothing we can point to and say, that's the fixed, unchanging essence of that thing. It's never going anywhere. That's it. So emptiness is basic to our practice. It's basic to our understanding of everything we encounter because it's connected, partly because it's connected to the three marks of existence, or the three characteristics of all conditioned things. So if all conditioned things are empty, there are also some other characteristics about them. The first is impermanence. Everything arises because of causes and conditions, right? Nothing arises from nothing. So somehow a seed gets planted in the midst of the right kinds of conditions, and something arises out of that. It might be a plant, but it might be an idea, or a life, or a book, right? Whatever this conditioned thing is. So those causes and conditions that are giving rise to whatever this conditioned thing is are changing all the time. Therefore, what arises out of them is changing all the time, moment by moment by moment. So if the causes of something are changing, of course what arises out of it have to change as well. So things are changing all the time. Therefore, right, no fixed permanent self-nature because of impermanence. Everything is empty then on that basis. What can we grab and say, this is the unchanging essence of this thing, if all the causes and conditions are changing, and what's arising is changing too. So we can see how impermanence and emptiness are quite deeply connected. So the very experience of deeply seeing impermanence is a gateway into seeing emptiness, right? It's directly related to our aspiration for the meaning of the Dharma, if emptiness is a big piece of that. So here's how Tairebu Tsunoda describes it, and he is a teacher at Komazawa University. And Komazawa University is the Sodoshu University in Japan. It's the place where most of the clergy go in Sodoshu. So clearly, he studied this and teaches about it. He says, when one truly sees into the flux of arising and disappearing, the self-centered mind does not arise. Thoughts of seeking fame and profit cease, and the mind that seeks the way of Buddha arises. For this reason, when this mind that seeks enlightenment, the mind that sees into the transient nature of the world, the mind that seeks the way arises, we become free from the selfish, egocentric mind, the mind which seeks fame and profit. We are then alarmed at the extremely quick passage of time. Without wasting any time, we practice as if we were batting away flames enveloping our head and hair. We devote ourselves to the practice, reflecting on the uncertainty and fragility of our bodies and lives. So the very fact that we see impermanence and how quickly things are changing and time is passing is actually an impetus to practice, right? To get on the cushion. So our aspiration to understand the Dharma supports our seeing impermanence, or our seeing with wisdom, or our seeing with Buddha's eye. And seeing impermanence reinforces our aspiration to practice and to understand the meaning of the Dharma. So these two things are happening, they're rising together. It's not like we have one and then we do the other. As soon as we see impermanence, we go, oh, I really need to practice now. Because this body is finite. This body, I've only got so much time in this human form. This human form is the ground of my practice. So golly, just seeing impermanence and seeing that bit of emptiness means I have some aspiration to practice. So these things are a bit self-reinforcing. So the next mark of existence is no self. So even though we think we're individuals that we can identify as sort of being self, being ourselves, we think we stay this way somehow throughout our lives, that there's something that continues that we can identify. There's actually nothing we can point to that says, that's the unchanging me, right? Because we have 5 skandhas, and those 5 skandhas are clinging to 5 skandhas, and we think, oh, this is the permanent unchanging self. Well, if we look deeply, what can we grasp and say, this is me that doesn't change, right? We don't think the same way we did a few years ago. We know this body changes over time. What part of this thing can we point to and say, this is the self? So we aren't separate from all other beings. We aren't separate from things in the universe or reality or Buddha's way. In the midst of this changing, fluctuating self and body and mind, there's just this constantly shifting pile of skandhas, right? There's this constantly shifting heap of aggregates, is another way to put that. So we give that pile a name, and we write a story about it, and we cling to it and say, this is me. But we know that's just 5 skandhas clinging to 5 skandhas. So without a separate, permanent self-nature, even this self is empty. So here is emptiness right here. We don't have to look very far. It's not like we got to go in search of emptiness. We can look at self and our concepts about self and the reality of no self and say, emptiness is right here. So even this self is empty. And finally, the third mark of existence is suffering or unease or unsatisfactoriness, right? We've all got deep personal intimacy with that. So because of emptiness, we can't use conditioned things to make ourselves happy or comfortable in the long term because everything's changing, because there's nothing we can grasp. So how do we grab onto anything and say, this is going to make me happy, forever and ever? If I only had this thing, whatever that is, I would be happy. Well, we look at the logic of that and say it can't possibly work. We can't use the things we encounter to make ourselves happy. So those things are going to change. Those things are going to go away because of impermanence. And there's no self, really, that we need to shore up with those things. There's no self that needs to build identity around having those things or being in touch with those things. So this grasping and chasing ultimately doesn't work. It doesn't make us happy. Even if in the short term we think, well, finally I got that promotion, or I finally, got that chocolate cake, in the end, everything's impermanent and there's nothing we can grasp. So much as we like to maybe deny emptiness or deny those 3 marks of existence, when we do, we've set ourselves up for suffering because that's not how the world actually works, right? We start to see that, wait a minute, these things that we're prone to doing, are working against how reality actually is. So there's no chance for that not to set us up for suffering. We're going to have expectations that don't get met. We're going to have small self-desires that don't get met in the long term because of the three marks of existence and because of emptiness. So I think there's also a connection here to interconnection, if you will, which is, if you look at what are the three marks of existence, interconnection isn't on that list, but I think we can't ignore it in this case. Within this one unified reality, nothing can actually be separate. So how can something be outside of reality or outside of Buddha's way? It's not possible. So interconnection is a piece of that story. It just has to be. If everything's interconnected, then we can't really draw a boundary between this thing and that thing, or this person and another person, or anything we encounter and say, well, this is the self-nature of this thing, which is different than the self-nature of that thing. If these things are connected, how can they have separate, distinct self-natures? It can't work. So it's like saying the right hand and the left hand somehow are not connected or have different self-natures. And, can't work. Same body, right? So it's without a separate self-nature, because of interconnectedness, we can see how everything is empty. So again, we come back to emptiness as a really key piece of our aspiration for the logic of the Dharma, or the sense of the Dharma. So the Bodhidharma says, if we really understand that all of existence is empty, if we really understand why that's true, why all of existence is empty, then we understand the workings of the Dharma. So he says that's the key thing. That's the key piece. Take anything else, I think, that our teachers are teaching us about, and we can see how it's related to these teachings about emptiness. We can really see how emptiness and the three marks of existence are behind almost anything else we encounter that our teachers are telling us. So, look at the Four Noble Truths. Look at the nature of suffering. Here, when we deny the three marks of existence, we suffer because, again, we're sort of out of alignment with reality, right? So some of the most basic teachings are involved here. We don't want to believe that things are impermanent. We'd like to think that the things we have and the things we love are never going to leave us or change. We'd like to believe that there is a self. It feels good to believe that there's a self in a kind of a fixed way. The universe doesn't care what we think. The universe is going to do what the universe does. So we can have all the ideas we want to about the universe, but we need to understand that those are our ideas. So it's helpful to have ideas so that we can move through the world in a relative way and interact with other people and sort of carry out our bodhisattva day-to-day lives. But we really need to understand that's my idea, right? That's not necessarily the way the universe works. So how about precepts related to this? We've said here before, Mahayana precepts are a description of how we live, really, when we understand emptiness, when we understand the Buddha way. So rather than being a list of rules and do's and don'ts, in the Mahayana tradition, it's more about it's a description of here's how we live if we have aspired to the sense of the Dharma, and we really see how emptiness functions and how the universe functions. So we have no urge to break precepts when we really see how things work. We don't have this sort of compulsion to work against them. So it becomes a description rather than rules and do's and don'ts. So how about Dogen's main teachings? Things like practice and enlightenment are not two. How does that relate? Well, it's our understanding of emptiness that allows us to manifest Buddha nature in a kind of a clear, unclouded way. We're manifesting our inherent awakening in a really clear way. So we don't need to go out and acquire Buddha nature, right? Or acquire awakening in some way. Those things are already here. We don't get them by practicing. Our teachers have told us for years and years, we don't acquire Buddha nature or acquire awakening by hours on the cushion or by our practice. Those things are there. But can we live from that place? Can we manifest them clearly? Or do we get in the way of them? Does our delusion kind of get in the way of those things? When we practice based on understanding emptiness, then we immediately manifest that awakening in a clear way without the hindrances of our delusion that we sometimes don't even see. Sometimes we're aware of our delusion, sometimes we're not. It's either we choose to not see it or it's so deeply held, right? It's just so, it's something we've held for such a long time that it's difficult to see all of our delusion and kind of put it aside. So if we can manifest this awakening without our hindrances, then immediately, as Dogen says, practice and awakening are not two. So we come right back to these key teachings about emptiness. So emptiness is key to our aspiration to understand how the universe makes sense, how the universe works. So some Westerners come to Buddhism because it feels logical. It feels scientific, right? It feels kind of systematic. And it is. Those things are there. But Buddhism also doesn't deny that we are emotional beings. In this human form, we are not robots. We are not computers. There are elements of our being that are emotional, and those things are important, right? We appreciate friendship. We appreciate art. We appreciate chocolate cake, right? There are things we like. There are things we love. We get upset when a loved one dies. We get upset if we lose a job or we have some adversity in our lives. We see things around us that make us feel annoyed or grateful or exasperated or happy, right? This is part of the human experience. So despite the fact that we're using words like the logic of the Dharma or making sense of the Dharma, and we're sounding like that's an intellectual kind of thing, like somehow the emotion doesn't enter into it, I don't think that's true. I don't think we can ignore what goes on in this human condition, which means we're also emotional beings. So there's an emotional sense to this Dharma as well. I don't think this gate is asking us to put that piece aside. So here's the thing. I think the Dharma can make sense of the entirety of this human condition, the logical functions and the emotional functions and all the stuff that's a part of our lives, right? Our practice lets us see what's really happening in this moment-to-moment experience so we don't get hijacked. We don't feel like we've been hit by a tsunami of either emotion or confusion or all of that stuff. I think our practice helps us sort through what that moment-by-moment experience of this human form is, so that we see both the individual experience and the experience of the universal self. So on that basis, then, we get to make a plan for some kind of skillful action. We can have some confidence, too, that we can carry that out. We can believe that we can move through the world as bodhisattvas with wisdom and with compassion and with a broad perspective, which doesn't get trapped in seeing only the small self, right? We get to see the big picture. We get to see the whole thing. We get to see how the pieces fit together. And that's the pieces of our individual human sort of day-to-day experience, and also the piece about how does the universal self and the individual self, how do these things fit together, right? So we can make bodhisattva vows then to liberate all beings from suffering. We can have some insight into how that suffering arises and what we do about that. And we can do that in a balanced way. We can keep our equanimity. We can see with wisdom, but we can also see with compassion. We can see how those two things fit together, right? Because this is so much of our practice is about integration. Because we can only see a little bit at a time in this human form. So much of our practice is about integration. It's partly about seeing all the aspects of ourselves, whether we want to or not. We know there's parts of ourselves we just assume kind of say they weren't there. Things about ourselves that we're not so happy about, things we don't like, things that make us uncomfortable, things we wish were different. So there's that kind of integration. It's seeing the entire human experience, but it's also the integration of wisdom and compassion and relative and absolute, and repentance and vow, and individual and universal, right? There's all of these elements. So one of the beautiful things about our practice, I think, is that it helps us to integrate all of that. It's not that separation is there. We see the separation, but dropping off body and mind, arousing bodhicitta or bodhishan, I think is the first step or an important step to bringing all of those things together. So we can see that things are distinct but not separate. We need to make distinctions in our moment-by-moment, day-to-day life, but we also need to see the non-separation. So this gate, I think, is inviting us, right, to bring these things together, to do the kind of integration that we need to do. So if we aspire to seek out the meaning of the Dharma, I think then we're on our way to being the best bodhisattvas that we can be, right? So let me stop there. What would you like to say about all of these, all of these things we've touched on today? Aspiring for the meaning of the Dharma, what the Dharma means for you maybe, or questions that you have about how do we integrate all of these things and bring them together. So don't forget to unmute if you have something to say or ask, and I'm going to throw the floor open to you. Jeff is clapping. Who's got something to say? Somebody always has something to say. Mark's got something to say. Myogen.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, one of right. This really cuts to the core of what I've been sitting with lately. I was watching a Dharma talk about by a Theravada teacher, and she was talking about aspects of time. And one of the interesting things she said, and I'll paraphrase, was that isn't emptiness wonderful? It gives us so many opportunities for to act, to provide meaning. And one of the things I think you're just kind of dancing around is that we have agency in all of this, and we have the ability. We have agency. We have the ability to create meaning, and it's not in the and it's not in the sense of meaning of being. I think the world should be X, Y, and Z, but it is the ability to take the world, what it gives us, and not just be robotic, return it and pass it, return it, but also work with the world and provide something that's a little bit better for everybody. And in that sense, in that sense, emptiness doesn't seem like a void, right? It's like yeah, thank you very much. It's, it's very eye-opening in many different levels.
Yeah, it's interesting. We hear a word like emptiness and we think, well, there's just this void in which nothing moves and nothing changes and nothing happens. And when our teachers tell us, emptiness is actually really dynamic. There's a lot of movement in emptiness. Why? Because everything's changing all the time. So right there, we know, it's not like emptiness is this sort of vast outer space which is cold and unmoving and, there's nothing going on. Within emptiness, we certainly have agency. And in fact, we have to have agency. We can't sit still because liberating beings means we're doing something. We're actively doing something. Now, actively doing something could be we get on a cushion and sit zazen, right? So it doesn't necessarily mean I'm out in the world, creating or doing whatever outside of my home or all that. I mean, it could be that, but it could simply be I'm sitting quietly and letting the entire catastrophe in. So I think you raise a really important point because it would be easy to see emptiness as, something out there which is frozen. And emptiness is not that because emptiness is here. I mean, look at anything. Emptiness is here. So we know there is action, there's activity, there's agency in that. If we truly understand emptiness, not this way, with body and mind, if we truly are intimate with emptiness, then my gosh, there's movement, in every way because what is that but liberating beings? So we can't sit still. We sit still in the middle of emptiness, but there's still some movement there. Did you have a follow-up, Mark?
Yeah, and the fun point about that is that we that is a part of emptiness. That is emptiness manifesting in and of itself, which makes me smile a lot. It's like when I first started this practice a decade ago, years ago, I kind of equated Buddhism with the Greek cynics. And basic rundown is that you can't understand as a man to calm your mind. Epicureans, for example, they inverted value. So instead of trying to, pleasure was something negative, and so you tried to avoid that to provide this equanimity. And what this gate's showing me today is that, the cynic type of view is really thinking of yourself separate from the world, separate from emptiness, separate from the universe. That's where you get that. That's where you get the void of emptiness. You're separate from everything, and so you just got to be calm about it. And here it's like, no, you are part of everything, and that's the joy of it. So yeah, this is a really wonderful gate.
I love the 108 gates because we just dig into some interesting stuff, right? So you are right in the middle of emptiness. So, exactly as Milton says, we're right in the middle of emptiness. It can't be something out there which is separate from us and contains nothing, because here's emptiness right here. So we're dancing in the middle of emptiness all the time. We're not actually separate. Emptiness is a deep and intimate friend for us. We just need to, get that. In our Zazen work and study, our aspiration is we want to understand that in a particular way. So thank you for the joy of that gate, Mark, because I also think these gates are, they let us look at our lives in a really interesting way, right? I was saying to my own Deishi, my own students the other day, one of the things I really appreciate about going through these gates with you is that, I'm not choosing my Dharma topic. I just take the next gate. It might be something I like. It might be something I'm interested in. It might be something I understand. It might be something I completely, sometimes I look at these intersections, I've got to tell you, and I just go, what am I going to do with that? What is coming out of the middle of that? And that lasts about 5 minutes, because then it becomes clear to me, what's actually happening. But I just think it's so interesting because these gates make us look at things in a different way, gee, we're right in the middle of emptiness. We don't have to go somewhere to get that. It's not separate from us. It's not some cold, unfeeling thing out there. Here is emptiness, right? We're dancing in the middle of that. So anyway, thank you for that perspective, because it makes me happy when somebody finds some joy in these gates and in the Dharma teachings. I think, Carla, did you have something you also wanted to say? No? Okay, you were waving as though you did. Somebody else had a hand up, I think. Did I see somebody else with something to add? Nope. Everyone okay? All right. Okay, in that case, I'm going to pitch back to Hoshin for the rest of today's activities. We have announcements and we have a world peace ceremony to do. So thanks for diving into this gate with me today. On to the next thing. Thanks so much.